Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into it. If you've spent any time at all online, you know that comment sections can get pretty heated, right? But it is incredibly rare to see them escalate into a massive, hyper-literate battle over the very soul of modern storytelling. Today, we're going to unpack a wild situation that starts as a totally mundane digital copyright strike, but almost instantly unravels into this massive clash of geopolitical and theological worldviews. So you might be wondering, how exactly does a standard YouTube copyright strike become a theological war? Well, to understand this, we're going to have to peel back the layers of a truly bizarre internet mystery. It starts with a standard legal threat and somehow ends up at Homer's Odyssey. I know, it sounds totally absurd, but the breadcrumbs left behind here reveal a really complex struggle over the unseen structures that govern our digital spaces and the ancient myths we use to make sense of them. Part 1. The Digital Culture Clash. We're going to begin our forensic journey at the very surface of this conflict. And honestly, the inciting incident here is so ordinary that it almost entirely masks the depth of what's actually happening beneath it. The stage is YouTube. A British sci-fi critic and former Special Forces librarian named Damien Walter issues a standard 48-hour copyright strike against a systems architect, Kyle McLean Smith. It was just over a piece of content discussing tech billionaire philosophies. Now, normally this is where the story ends, right? Someone cites fair use, or maybe the video just gets taken down. But instead of citing fair use, Smith fires back with absolute revolutionary rhetoric. He views this standard strike as the King of England's apostasy against American sovereignty. He immediately pivots away from digital copyright law and jumps straight into geopolitical warfare, literally accusing Walter of acting as a soft power agent of the British Crown, invoking MI6 and the spirit of 1776. It is a completely jarring, almost shocking shift from your standard legal defense to this explosive geopolitical framing. Part 2. Zombie ants and parasites. Now, what's really fascinating here is how Smith maps this legal threat onto biology to explain these unseen power structures. He doesn't just see a YouTube moderation tool. He sees a biological invasion. On the left side here, we have the Ophiocordyceps fungus, the famous zombie ant parasite. Research shows that this fungus physically surrounds and invades an ant's muscle fibers to control its behavior collectively, all while leaving the brain entirely intact. Smith applies this exact concept to his real-world conflict. Just like that fungus bypasses the brain to control the muscles, he argues that an external imperial parasite is using platform rules and cultural influence to control the American Republic. The host is infected, and its actions are no longer its own. Part 3. Logos, Mythos, and Jedi. So to understand why this cultural capture is even happening, we have to look at the weapons being used in this asymmetric war. We're not talking about guns or policy, we're talking about stories. This brings us to the core framework that Damien Walter uses to analyze science fiction. He draws a really hard line between two ancient Greek concepts. On one side, you've got logos. That's our modern obsession with logic, science, reason, data. On the other side is mythos, story, meaning, identity, and shared sacred values. Walter argues that our society has become so hyper-focused on the literal facts of logos that we've entirely lost touch with our mythos. We've just forgotten that human identity is actually formed through shared storytelling. The crucial point to take away here is that popular science fiction isn't just popcorn entertainment. It's actually a modern attempt to repurpose ancient myths. Walter points to this incredible concept called mythopoeia. It's a term coined by J.R.R. Tolkien, and it means the conscious creation of a new mythology to explain the world around us. Because we lack this overarching ancient mythos in our hyper-rational, tech-driven society, we are actively constructing a new one through cinema and sci-fi. And George Lucas literally did exactly this with Star Wars. He took the ancient hero's journey that Joseph Campbell identified, and he spun it into a modern mythos. The Jedi teachings about the Force, that's not just a cool movie mechanic. It is a modern myth about symbiotic relationships, harmony, and an underlying energy that balances opposites. It's a prime textbook example of mythopoeia in action. Moving on to part 4, the Jesus smuggling theory. Let's dig into the next layer and see how this all builds into the core theological reveal of this crazy internet clash. Walter takes this whole idea of modern myth-making and applies it to massive contemporary blockbuster films, specifically looking at Christopher Nolan's work, like the movie Interstellar. He identifies this hidden underlying religious framework that is operating just beneath the surface of the hard science fiction. And Walter actually coins a specific term for this: Jesus smuggling. He defines it as the practice of constructing a story as a secret Christian allegory. So a secular, mainstream audience doesn't even realize they're being taught theology, kind of like what C.S. Lewis did with Narnia. Walter claims creators are secretly smuggling Christ into secular sci-fi. But Smith reads this critique and is absolutely furious. He views this hidden, metaphorical approach and Walter's somewhat mocking tone toward it as a cheap, cynical hijacking of true divinity. Part 5. O brother, where art thou? This brings us right to the focal point of Smith's counterattack, which requires a really deep understanding of cinema to decode. In the comments section, Smith screams the phrase, "O brother, where art thou?" Now, at first glance, the algorithm just flags this as a random, maybe mildly hostile sigh. Actually, scratch that. It is not a random insult at all. It is a highly specific, totally weaponized cinematic reference aimed directly at Walter's concept of Jesus smuggling. Here is where we can really see the genius of this comparison. We can directly contrast Walter's idea of hiding faith in sci-fi against the Coen brothers' cinematic masterpiece, O Brother, Where Art Thou? Is explicitly a modernized, localized adaptation of Homer's epic Greek poem, The Odyssey. But the Coen brothers didn't hide the spiritual elements. They intentionally swapped out the ancient Greek pantheon, like Zeus and Poseidon, and translated their divine interventions completely out in the open into the framework of 1930s Southern American Christianity, using baptisms, blind prophets, and gospel spirituals. So by invoking this specific film, Smith is fiercely defending the open integration of faith and art. He's arguing that Interstellar represents a false, secular counterfeit that just reduces the divine to human technology and evolution. He holds up O Brother, Where Art Thou as the ultimate example of how a classic myth can be spiritualized. He's saying that true epic narratives do not need to apologize for or smuggle in their sacred roots. They can and absolutely should be worn proudly for everyone to see. Part 6. Prophecy versus Platform Trolling. But here is where the rubber really meets the road for us. How do the automated systems of our modern digital world handle such intense, layered theological proclamations? Well, they handle them terribly. To a platform algorithm, Smith's hostile repetition of phrases like MI6 or apostasy just looks like disruptive spam or trolling. But internally, from Smith's perspective, this isn't spam at all. It's a coordinated spiritual warning mechanism. In theological terms, it operates as a litany, a sacred, repetitive mantra establishing an unyielding spiritual thesis. What the algorithm flags as a community guideline violation is actually what we might call a prophetic reclamation. Smith sees himself as a watchman, reflecting this immediate, pressing duty to sound the alarm the very moment cultural or theological subversion is spotted. He is actively trying to pull the sacred meaning back out of a space that the platform and the critic treat as purely secular. And this brilliantly illustrates our main takeaway today. The clash we've just unpacked isn't really about a 48-hour copyright strike on a YouTube video. It is a profound, underlying struggle over whether our shared digital spaces will be governed by sterile, secular rules, or if they can hold open sacred meaning. When someone uses highly intense religious framing to challenge a standard movie review, the platform flags it as disruptive, effectively treating the insertion of the sacred into the secular as a hostile attack. Which leaves us with a really critical lens for our own media consumption. As you navigate the real world and the stories you consume within it, what kind of mythos is shaping your reality? Are the stories you watch quietly smuggling values you haven't even noticed? Or are they openly integrating a larger shared truth? I want to leave you with that thought to chew on. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the narrative.